don't think we learn anything from it. None of those Finland players were going to get anywhere near playing in the Premier League, to be honest. It was disappointing in terms of the nature of the performance. They got the job done and move on to the next one now.
Palmer couldn't get into the game on Sunday night. It was another example of playing Cole Palmer in a position that he doesn't thrive in. That's not his best position.
Well, on the face of it, it's been a poor international break for Cole Palmer because he's played 2 games, he's made no impact in either of them. Without being able to say definitively what Lee Carsley individually is trying to get out of this interim job, I think it's very difficult to then read too much into his decisions.
Oh, I don't think it's the right time for him to take the job. I don't think he's the right person for the job.
Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook and the former Northern Ireland international assistant manager Terry Gibson. We're here to look back on a weekend of international action and we'll look forward to the return of the Premier League. A couple of key questions from the weekend's football, which we're going to get into over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. Lee Carsley, has he ruled himself out of the job? Do the FA have a plan for Gareth Southgate's successor? Should it be better? Or are they doing the right thing? And realistically, if it isn't going to be Lee Carsley, who should it be and who can it be? We'll delve into all of that in the next few minutes here on Premier League All Access. Crook's been in Disneyland. I feel like I've been involved in a bit of a cartoon caper, not only because of the Greek oddity, but because of the doesn't he want the job storyline from the weekend. Crook, what ride at Disneyland most resembles the England team?
Wow, that's a great question. There's a Star Wars ride there, Hyperspace Mountain, which is a roller coaster pretty much in pitch black, in darkness. So maybe that sums up the FA at this moment in time.
Okay. Terry, what rides have you been on over the course of the weekend? What's been getting your heart going up and down?
Yeah, just watching the international games that I could watch. Not too many on television, I have to be honest. So the England
that's
game
true, isn't it? Yeah.
The
England game was a sort of an outlier.
Game on yesterday afternoon. Although I must admit, when I was younger, my parents, obviously working full-time jobs, taking me to football on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and Sunday afternoon was always a sleep time, which was pretty dull for a youngster growing up. And I did, watching that game yesterday, think, I bet my dad would have been asleep watching this afternoon.
Right, okay. A highlight for me was Jack Grealish post-match when he bet Trent Alexander-Arnold 500 quid, or he revealed that he bet Trent Alexander-Arnold 500 quid, that he couldn't score that free kick. And then did. It's the way he sort of casually said it, went, I'm out of pocket now. It was interesting because I hope he's actually got greater integrity than Alex Crook, who I once bet £500 that he couldn't run the Great South Run in under 1 hour and 25 minutes. And he has never completed the race and he has never paid up.
It was an hour and a half, actually, and I've twice.
It was an hour and 25
under
minutes.
That, albeit before we placed that bet, and I did have sciatica when I had to pull out of our wager.
It's not true. He's an absolute welcher. Right, so much to come, including talking about what happened with England, what might be next around the corner for Manchester City. You've got a change at the top of the tree, but first, let's get into what happened in Helsinki. Well, you can't criticise a 3-1 win too much, but it was still a little bit incoherent, a little bit too open. Not enough chances created against a team that was ranked just above Cape Verde in the FIFA World Rankings. Palmer couldn't really get into the game. Defensively, they were vulnerable. However, they won. And there were 3 very impressive goals, I thought. Terry, wider issues, and we'll get onto the managerial situation in just a second, but what were your views on the game itself?
Well, I think it's, I'm not sure what we were to gain from it. I think there was only a loss for the Lee Carsley and the England players because of the defeat against Greece. They had to react. There was a reaction, but we had to bear in mind the standard of the team that they were playing. So what was we expecting? Was we expecting a 5 or 6 goal victory, exciting football? Possibly, but ultimately we won't never look back on this game now as anything other than the 3 points needed and a win. It's not much to talk about in It's not going to go down in the record books as one of England's finest games, but they avoided a catastrophic draw or defeat against a team that were nowhere near the level of England. And it's astonishing when you look at the quality of players that England have. None of those Finland players are going to get anywhere near playing in the Premier League, to be honest. I mean, you look at them, and there should be a huge difference between the two teams. And unfortunately, yesterday, in a lot of periods of the game, there wasn't that difference. So I think that's something whoever takes over, whoever gets the job, has got to resolve. That I look upon England when they're playing at the moment, and have done for a while, as if they're joining the dots, and it's not natural. There's nothing instinctive about it. A team hasn't been built. I didn't think it was built before the European Championships. And at the moment, because of the interim manager situation, we're just meandering along and hoping that we've got good enough talent to beat opponents that we should be beating. So I don't think we learned anything from it. It was disappointing in terms of the nature of the performance. The excitement level wasn't great. They got the job done and move on to the next one now.
Yeah, the building of the team thing is quite interesting because I suppose that is what has been absent for a while with England. There's been a lot of churn in terms of players. I think we talked about it before the European Championships. The amount of players that went to the World Cup but didn't go to the Euros was quite big in terms of an 18-month turnaround. So that in itself means that the nucleus of a team isn't really as tight as it probably should be when you'd had a manager there for a long period of time. So the new manager is obviously going to be charged with building a team, and that comes with being ruthless and making choices and making bold choices. And in fairness, he did make a couple of bold choices again this weekend. And one of those was playing Trent Alexander-Arnold at left back. But what I don't get about that, Crook, and maybe you can give me a little bit of a sort of reason why that is the case, why that was a good idea, is that you aren't going to play Trent Alexander-Arnold at left back against Germany, against France, against Holland in a major tournament. It just isn't going to happen. You're not going to do it. So what is the benefit of picking him in this fixture? Is it just because he's in the squad, we need to play him because we need to get him involved and we can't find another place for him to play and we need someone to cover the left-back role, so someone's got to take their turn? Or is it with a sort of bit of forethought, which I thought was the idea behind these experiments, to think, well, hold on, that gives us pause for thought in the future?
I think there's a few explanations, and ultimately only Lee Carsley will be able to tell you exactly why. I think, one, there's a danger, and we've seen it in these two fixtures, of trying to shoehorn the best players into the team, if that means playing players out of position, like he did with Jude Bellingham as a false nine in the game against Greece, or moving Trent to left back in this game, then so be it. Secondly, I think you have to question why Lee Carsley is making such bold changes. Is he doing it to build a team culture for the future? Is he doing it to give England managers in the future different options as to where players can play? Or is he doing it rather cynically to enhance his own reputation as a coach, so that even if he doesn't get this England job, he's going to get a chance of getting a good Premier League job, for example, rather than just hopefully, in his words, going back to the under-21s. I think it's all muddled. You know, the team selection seems a bit muddled. 6 changes, I think it was, between the two games. What he says from one interview to the next, literally in the space of a few minutes, as it was after the game at the weekend, is muddled as well.
And we'll come on to that. We'll come on to that. But let's concentrate on the team first of all.
Yeah, but I don't think without being able to say definitively what Lee Carsley individually is trying to get out of this interim job, I think it's very difficult to then read too much into his decisions.
Okay, well, Phil Foden wasn't in the team, Terry. He's struggled in an England shirt for quite a while now. Why do you think that is?
Do you know, it's baffling, and I think we're all the same, aren't we? We look at him when he operates for Manchester City, he is world class. He was the Premier League Player of the Year last season, and yet we see him play for England, and it doesn't appear to be the same player. He's not the first to fall foul of that act. We see lots of players over the years, so that comes down to the coaching, the management, where he plays. We have an abundance of players that want to play in that position, and then therefore you start moving them about. We'll come to Cole Palmer a bit later as well, and we have lots of players. That goes down to coaching methods. In England, over the last few years, where we lack centre forwards, we don't really have too many out-and-out wingers. Everybody wants to play on the opposite side and play on the inverted wingers. So
yeah,
we do lack. We have somehow created an abundance of players that like to operate in that position between midfield and attack. And when they have to start playing in different positions, it doesn't suit them. I think the next manager, whoever becomes manager, has to define a player that plays there, define a system. And what I went back to at the beginning and start building a team. That means we can't do an Argentina when Maradona was manager and play 5 centre forwards or 5 the best attackers because they've all got to play and you don't win things. So there has to be choices made and who plays that role. You know, whether it's Foden, whether it's Cole Palmer, whether it's Grealish, Bellingham, there's so many options, but it's got to be nailed down. You can't fit them all in, and Foden plays in a team that doesn't suit him for England.
And this is a sort of key thing, isn't it, Crook? You know, you've got to decide whoever you are as the manager, you've got to decide who your best player is and who you're going to build the team around. Whether that's Cole Palmer as a number 10, and then everything sprouts from there, or it's Jude Bellingham as a number 10, or Jude Bellingham as an 8, or whatever it is. You've got to have your best players, maybe your spine of your team, and then branch off of that. How do I get the best out of those guys that I think are going to win me a major tournament title? Because that's the brief from the FA. That's what they want to do. Palmer couldn't get into the game on Sunday night. Just for whatever reason, he just looked lost. But again, that was another example of playing Cole Palmer in a position that he doesn't thrive in. That's not his best position. So I didn't understand, again, why did we do that? Why try and shoehorn someone in when you've got other options available?
Well, on the face of it, it's been a poor international break for Cole Palmer because he's played 2 games. He's made no impact in either of them. He would probably turn around, and you've already sort of alluded to it. In the first game, he played in a deep-lying midfield role, which I know he's done, you know, in the past, but it's not where he excels. And obviously here he's shoved out wide right. And again, he's always going to want to try and come inside, and it becomes very congested for England. So I think you're absolutely right. It's a puzzle that Gareth Southgate couldn't solve during the Euros because, again, he was shoehorning certain players into the team, you know, at the detriment of any real balance. And I think Lee Carsley has fallen into the same trap. And I think whoever comes in now moving forward, and we'll come on to it, I don't think it will be Lee Carsley. I find it very difficult now to envisage a scenario where he gets the manager's job of the England senior team on a full-time basis. They need somebody strong who's going to be ruthless, who's going to not be afraid to look behind him on the bench and see world-class talent that can come on and change the game. But you're right, they need to stumble upon an 11 that is going to get the best out of the team rather than just individuals who obviously have world-class attributes but can't necessarily all play together. We're back to Lampard, Gerrard and Scholes, aren't we?
Angel Gomez, I thought, was really good at times. I mean, I think once or twice he gave the ball away, but, you know, he's playing a risky path because he wants to progress the ball forward, but he's neat and tidy in the middle of the park and he gives you a sense of control of the football. And there was times when I thought that's good. There was a lot of sideways passing going from one side to the other and not enough penetrative passing, but that's a different matter. That is something that they need to organise. I thought Mark Gahey did really well, reads the game superbly, but England still gave up too many chances to Finland, who are ranked 64th in the world. And, you know, don't ever score any goals. Yet yesterday, if Fredrik Jensen just slightly manages to even mishit that ball, then it's 1-1. And that's a big issue for Lee Carsley. But let's talk about him then, because that is really what everybody's concerned about or questioning now. You know, he said after the game to ITV, to Gabriel Clark, he said, "This job deserves a world-class coach who's won trophies, and I'm still on the path to doing that." The inference is that he wasn't the man to take the job. That's what it felt like when you were watching it, when you were listening to it. You know, even when you read the quotes written down. And sometimes when you read quotes that are written down, they don't always come across in the same manner in which they were said. But it does feel as if that's what he was saying. Then 10 minutes later, he walked into a press conference. He was asked to clarify that. Would it be wrong to say that you've ruled yourself out now, Lee? And he went, definitely. As if to say, no, I am in the running for it. Those are two contradictory statements, which I think probably means that this might not be the right time for him to take the job, Terry.
Oh, I don't think it's the right time for him to take the job. I don't think he's the right person for the job at the moment. I think he needs an assertive manager. I think what we've seen with Gareth Southgate, I mean, I don't want to be too critical of Gareth Southgate, but it seemed cosy playing for England, being in the England squad. That's why it was a surprise when he made so many drastic changes for the European Championships. And I get a little bit prickly sometimes when the players keep coming out saying they love playing for that manager, and because the best managers rub people up the wrong way. And when it's
Yeah.
too comfortable and too cosy, I do sort of get a little bit concerned that it's a closed shop. Everyone gets on really well. I think what England need now is a manager that comes in and rattles a few cages, shakes things up, is assertive, and you can only do that by being in a position where the players immediately respect you for what you've done in the game as a manager. And for Lee Carsley, that's difficult. It's impossible for him to achieve that because the players know he's been an under-21 coach. He hasn't managed a senior football team. It's difficult for him to be in that position to be assertive, and to upset people.
He also doesn't fit the brief. So the FA actually released the brief back in the summer, and the 7 sort of criteria are: he has to have experience of English football, a strong track record in the Premier League or leading international competition, which he doesn't have, will be experienced and successful identifying and managing and developing English qualified talent, and will target winning a major international tournament. Now, obviously, he hasn't got the experience of being in a Premier League frontline job or equivalent national competition. So, arguably, he wouldn't have fit into that criteria anyway. So, therefore, maybe he isn't being considered. I don't know. But at the beginning of this sort of period, in fact, I'd even say up until Thursday, it felt like a fait accompli that he was going to get this job, Crook. But it swung wildly in midweek. Now, is that just because of results, or have they already started a recruitment process that maybe people are unaware of and have started just to realise that is already ongoing?
Well, they're being very clandestine about this recruitment process. I reached out to people senior at the FA on Friday night. I think it was actually when the Thomas Tuchel rumours started to swirl from Germany. They said, we can't steer on this process. It's going to be done behind closed doors. And I guess you can understand that because it's such an important role, arguably the biggest job in English football. How far down the line are they with that process? I'm not convinced very far. Again, I checked in on Friday morning in the immediate aftermath of the Greece debacle, and neither Eddie Howe nor Graham Potter is out of work. And you'd have thought if he was going to be a serious contender, would already have been spoken to by now. They've not had an approach. Obviously, it's difficult to approach Eddie Howe because he's at Newcastle. And as you pointed out to me, if they did that, they would be going against their own rules and regulations, the FA. But I think they're going to take their time. And they have a cushion, don't they? They have a gap from the next international break when we know that Lee Carsley will take charge of the final 2 Nations League games. There aren't World Cup qualifiers until March. There might be a playoff now in the Nations League, which they could probably do without. But I don't expect to see any real movement on this, certainly until the turn of the year.
Okay. The recruitment in football is different. You don't ever, and Terry will probably back me up here, you don't ever speak to the person involved, do you, Terry? You actually speak to the people around the people that you really want to target. So you sort of, you talk to the people on the fringes of the conversation. Then when you really want to make the move, when you're just about to pull the trigger on a deal, that's when you speak to the actual person. So the idea that they haven't spoke to Graham Potter or Eddie Howe, I don't think is a surprise. Same with Thomas Tuchel, but I'm sure that there are little feelers going out to whoever it is, and I'm not saying that they're in the running, but involved in the active recruitment process. And I understand there is an active recruitment process going on, but they are just very good at keeping it quiet at this moment in time. John McDermott is a very experienced football operator. He's very well connected and he's a very good communicator. So I imagine that if he's doing it, he's doing it in a proper way. But who is it that you could possibly get? I said the key questions is, has Lee Carsley ruled himself out of the job? Well, I don't think he knows whether he's ruled himself out of the job or not. I don't think he wants to say that he's out of it, because I think they always want in the background the possibility that they might ask him to do it. And I'm not being funny there. I just think that they want him to be a live candidate just in case they need him to be. That they might have to turn to him if they can't get over the line with some of the people that they want. Do the FA have a plan, and realistically, who could get it? Who are the candidates then, Crook?
Well, I think Eddie Howe is a candidate, but as we spoke about on the White and Jordan show on Friday, it's difficult because they need to pay compensation. I think wages-wise, actually, although he would probably command more than they were paying Gareth Southgate, I don't think that's a big enough hurdle to stop it happening. I think the compensation to Newcastle is more of a problem. Obviously, you've got the Pep Guardiola situation where we think he's going to leave Man City at the end of the season, but he would smash the FA's pay structure. And again, are they really going to pay 12, 15 million pounds a year salary? They've never done it before. Thomas Tuchel, I think he's pushing for the job. He's desperate to get back into English football, but I think those stories on Friday were more being led by his PR than from the FA, but that's not to say he isn't a candidate. I think then you look at people like Frank Lampard, part of that golden generation, who I think, unlike Lee Carsley, if he got the job, he would have the courage in his convictions. He would know exactly what he wants from this England team. Whether you think he's qualified or he's achieved enough in the game is a different story. So they're the names that have been mentioned to me. Graham Potter, obviously, but I've said he's out of work. You'd have thought if the FA were serious about appointing him, then maybe those conversations would already have taken place. Pochettino's gone to America. Obviously, he's got a connection with McDermott. That won't happen now. The other name that came into my head this morning, and I've got nothing to suggest he is in the running, but Michael Carrick. Frank Lampard is a contender. Surely Michael Carrick has to be as well. When you look at what he did at Middlesbrough last season, he's had a bit of experience at Manchester United in a difficult dressing room, did quite well in an interim basis. So he's certainly more qualified, in my opinion, than Lee Carsley, if you're going to look for an Englishman.
Yeah, he doesn't fit the brief, though, does he, of managing in the Premier League? So I mean,
he had 3 games in the
Premier
League at United, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's a strong track record in the Premier League or a leading competition. Possibly not ready just yet, but you never know. Look, there is a dearth of English coaches, and that's another reason why the Lee Carsley thing is such a live option. Because, Terry, the FA want to show that their pathway of developing coaches, their elite player performance program, has not only produced good players, and there's a lot of good players, but it's also produced good coaches as well. And there hasn't been enough of that recently. So they would like to have a poster boy for that.
Oh, of course they would. And that would be great. But there aren't too many English managers managing in the Premier League. I'm thinking Sean Dyche and Eddie Howe.
Gary O'Neill.
Missing anybody? Gary O'Neill.
Yeah.
So there's the 3 options that currently, and Alex mentioned Frank Lampard, who's managed previously in the Premier League. So the choices are few and far between, and it does look. Eddie Howe would be a great option, I think. Great experience at Bournemouth, great doing well at Newcastle. He would be the ideal option, I believe. But are the FA, have they got the money to prize him away from Newcastle to pay the compensation? Is that something the FA want to get involved in? I don't know. But going back to your point about meetings taking place between intermediaries, the FA don't want to be turned down by anyone. So they don't want to pick someone and then speak to them. And then the breaking news is he's turned it down. They don't want 2 or 3 people doing that. So when everything's lined up, then we'll hear about it. But Eddie Howe would be the obvious one because he has that necessary experience in the Premier League now. He's had European football with Newcastle as well. That's the obvious one. Other than that, then it does look like we're going to have to, maybe look to, foreign manager again.
How can the FA be in a situation where they don't want to pay compensation for a manager? This is a job where you've given a brief where you expect the best to come through the door. You've got to pay, therefore, the wages for the best. Gareth Southgate was on £6 million. Pep Guardiola's on 20 million quid. You're not going to pay that, obviously, because they haven't got that money, but they've got to pay around £6-7 million per year for a top manager. You have to pay it. And if you have to pay compensation to get good managers are usually in jobs, so the likelihood of having to pay compensation is a high one. And also, it wasn't a secret that Gareth Southgate was coming towards the end of his tenure. He'd done 8 years as the England manager. He's the 3rd longest serving manager, I think, in England's history. So the idea that was going to continue forever was not a realistic prospect. It was coming to an end. Should they not have been better prepared for that?
I think they should. And I think if you're going to target the FA and criticise the FA, it's there because we all knew going into the tournament in Germany that if they won it, he'd go out in a blaze of glory. If they didn't and they came up short, then he would probably feel he served his time and it's time to hand it over to somebody else. So the fact they didn't have a contingency plan, and you have to remember that Mark Bullingham came out during the tournament and said, we're planning for Gareth Southgate to stay in charge. I do think that's a little bit of a dereliction of duty. In terms of the compensation... He
also said, though, Crook, during that he had a plan for succession. He said any big organisation has a plan for succession and a process going forward. So he sort of already suggested, and he said whether that's an interim basis or a permanent basis. So he'd said that there was a succession plan.
But I think that succession plan only seemed to have gone as far as to promoting Lee Carsley while they decide on what happens for the long term. And I still think they should have been more advanced in their plan. They should have asked Gareth before the tournament, and maybe they did. Do you think you're going to stay on? Because I think you'd have had a pretty good idea even before a ball was kicked. In terms of compensation, it's not just an FA problem. It's not an England problem. It always baffles me that clubs are willing to pay inflated transfer fees, massive wages, and take a gamble on players, but they don't ever seem to want to pay compensation for managers. I find it bizarre.
I know the FAs have a big remit. I get that. But there are people involved at the FA whose job is to look after the senior international football team, because it's the most important aspect of it. They have one job to do and they haven't done it and they can't do it. And we're all looking around. That's why we're getting these performances, and the players are turning up for international games now and they're thinking, well, Lee's only here for he's a nice bloke. We get on well with him. It's a couple of games, another couple of England caps. It's the international, it's the Nations League. It's not the World Cup qualifiers. It's not Europe. So this is why we're meandering down this road at the moment, where we're just, everyone's waiting to see what's going to happen next. But they had one job to do, and they haven't done it. It's a failure.
Okay. Well, we'll try and do it for them. When we come back, we'll assess the contenders. So Thomas Tuchel is the favourite not only for the England job, but for the Manchester United manager job as well. And one of the things that concerns me with Thomas Tuchel, as much as I would like him to be the next England manager, because I think a high-quality manager like that going into the England squad would be terrific, I think, for the development of some of those younger players. He is a high achiever, and that's what I think that group needs at this moment in time. I worry that maybe the interest in the England job is borne about by trying to snuff out any semblance of the Eric Ten Hag era and usher him into Old Trafford.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And as I alluded to earlier, when I started making inquiries on Friday night, the feedback I got was that this is Thomas Tuchel pushing his claims as opposed really to it have developed in terms of the FA. I think the story was that he was in negotiations with the FA. Well, we know that not to be the case. So let's see. I'm not saying he isn't someone who's on their shortlist. I think he has to be on their shortlist, but it's certainly not as developed as those articles in Germany have suggested. I know that his people and he himself are desperate to get back to England. He feels that is his next move. And it seems strange because obviously he didn't want the United job in the summer. I think he does want it now. And I do think there's a little bit of brinkmanship at play with these stories.
Yeah, so what's changed there? So why didn't he want it in the summer and does want it now? He had reservations about the structure. The structure's now firmly in place. That's not changing. So if he is to get the job, he's going to have to work in the structure that he didn't want to work in the summer, if it is Manchester United that end up snaring him and not England. I suppose the question, Terry, though, is what does he bring to a football team that gives him the ability to choose between those two big jobs?
Well, it's interesting because I looked into Thomas Tuchel and he's confrontational, he's disruptive, he's fallen out with every club he's ever worked with. But there is a common factor. It's over transfer policies and buying of players, recruitment. He always wants to be involved in that to the nth degree. So he wants control over that. He doesn't want the club bringing in players he doesn't really rate, doesn't want. He wants to be responsible for buying those players. That's the reason he's fell out of clubs. So do Manchester United want that aggro when they've got about 25 people that are there to do that job? But with England, there's no aggro. That's not going to be... He can't get involved in that. There's nothing to get involved in.
How is he going to fall out with England? What's he going to do there?
The players and the media. That would be the thing. You can't complain about the travel arrangements, facilities and stuff like that. You just pick from a pool of players that are eligible to play. So that does take away a lot of those confrontational issues that have led him to leaving clubs in the past. So but do Manchester United want that? And they've got, Alex will confirm this, as God knows how many people work at Manchester United now on recruitment and directors of football and technical directors and this and that. Do they want a manager that's going to demand control over transfer policy?
Well, no is the answer to that. They don't.
Yeah. Seem to me as the type of person the FA and this FA in particular would employ, because he does come with baggage. He is someone who does ask questions of his paymasters. As you say, it'd be a different type of scrutiny put on them than he would at club level, but he's not going to be easy to manage, and he's not going to be a media darling either. So I'm still struggling with that. And listen,
I don't know about that.
He
I
will.
don't know
He
about
would.
that.
He'd
I
fill the
don't know about
places.
that. Have you? I mean, I don't know how many times you spoke to him when he was the Chelsea manager.
he could be a grumpy
But he
so-and-so
was.
in defeat.
Oh, but he was. Maybe, but he was also wildly entertaining, engaging, and incredibly charming as well. And I can imagine, I can see it now. I'm sitting at that top table, big flashy smile, coming in after a game with his baseball cap on. Things are going well. He'll have reporters and interviewers eating out of his hand, especially if he knows he's got to do a good PR job. Because that's the other thing. When he went to Chelsea, especially first of all, he knew that he had to do a good PR job, and he did a brilliant PR job. In fact, he never got to the point where he properly fell out with Chelsea, just because of the new owners, because the recruitment was just all over the place. In the end, I think they just sort of came apart because he didn't want to work for them. They didn't want him to work for the organisation anymore, and it was just like, oh, let's have a clean break and start again. But he's he can be a charmer.
There is the other elephant in the room, though, and this is not my opinion, but there will be England fans who don't want a German in charge of the England team.
Yeah, I know that will come up, and I think it's an awkward conversation because the reason that people will think about that is because of sort of like the idea that it should be the best of the best. It should be it should be your best against our best. So you should have an Englishman who takes the English team. You should have a German who takes the German team. You should have an American who takes the American team. But I don't think it works like that anymore. I think it's such a global game. And as we've already highlighted, I don't think there's enough English candidates for you to turn around and say, well, it's got to be someone from this country. I don't think you can do that. So it's going to be someone foreign. And the fact that he's German, I don't think it matters. But, there will be some people who it matters to. I'm not one of them. Terry?
Yeah, I agree. I think it does matter whether he's German, French, Swedish, Italian, which we've had in the past. It doesn't matter to me. I would prefer to have an obvious England candidate, which is why I think Eddie Howe is that one. But other than that, I don't think there is an obvious one. So we do have to look around and see who's interested, and most importantly, get a manager that can take the national team forward.
Pep Guardiola used to struggle to beat Thomas Tuchel. That's a good enough notch on the CV, I think, to give him a big England tick. The other contenders are Eddie Howe, probably the best English candidate, as Terry has already said. He does fit the brief. The compensation is an issue. He would probably take some extracting from Newcastle United. And whilst I don't think that he would really revel in this sort of spotlight, I think he'd rather not be doing that. I also believe that he could handle it. And ultimately, it's a step forward in his progression as a coach because it's taking the national team. And I think he would see it that way, even though Newcastle fans would probably not be too happy about me saying it. Crook?
Yeah, you're right. He's not naturally comfortable with the media scrutiny. He would rather shy away from that. He's a perfectly pleasant guy. We've known him for a long, long time since he was a player. Both Bournemouth and Portsmouth, and he certainly improved on the PR side. And I think he could handle the pressure, and I think he would be ruthless. I don't think he would necessarily
definitely
do what Lee Carsley and Gareth did and just shoehorn players into the team for his own sake. He wouldn't be afraid of making the big decisions. So he gets a lot of ticks from me, as I say, just maybe apart from being the manager who's under the most scrutiny in England. But he's got Jason Tinder with him, isn't he, who does relish on that side, and
he'll like the scrutiny. Yeah, come on,
heat off him.
JT, get on the sidelines, JT, and start striking your stuff in the England gear. I like that. The England gear would definitely suit JT. Terry, the other contenders, Graham Potter, I suppose, doesn't really fit the brief for me because I don't think you could say he's got a strong record in the Premier League. Although he is relatively experienced and he's had a lot of jobs elsewhere, he's obviously making himself available, so he's probably in the process. But I think he'll be the one they turn to if they can't come up with a way of getting one of the other two. And it sounds like I'm ruling out Pep Guardiola. And the only reason I've sort of called on that is because he earns £20 million a year at Manchester City. And that's a lot. I mean, you'd have to take one hell of a pay cut, Terry, I think.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm pretty sure he's not short of a few bob, and I'm pretty sure that money isn't his motivation. But successful people like that know their value, know their worth, and out of principle, they want to be paid what they think they're worth. And the FA are not going to be able to pay Pep Guardiola unless he wants that challenge.
I mean, we could all have a whip round and try and raise as much as we can to get him there. I mean, because let's be honest, it is the dream choice. If you could pick anyone, you would pick him, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine Pep not training every day though?
No.
Not getting at players. He does it to opposing players at the end of the game.
I think he'd want to take the men's team, the women's team, and the 21s if he took it.
Yeah.
How do you think he would do in that ambassadorial role, though, as well? Because he hates dealing with the media.
I don't think that if you're hiring Pep Guardiola, you just have to sack all of that off. He's not a bad ambassador. You know, he is, and he's lucrative in terms of sponsorship, right? So he is, commercially, you're going to get loads of money back because if he's the poster boy for England, believe me, you're going to get a lot more deals done. He's not going to guarantee you success, but it's going to be a hell of a ride. You're more likely to have success if you've got him in charge. So the likelihood of you winning competitions, therefore the endorsements going up again, all of that stuff, I don't think he's a bad ambassador. I don't think he'd be easy for the media. He's not an easy person to deal with, but he's not a bad person to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you don't get the Manchester Manchester press back complaining about the fact that he's hard to deal with. He might be a bit spiky after games, but he's fine.
Yeah, I'll be surprised if it happens, but I wouldn't be surprised because I think there is an international job there for Pep at some stage. Now, he's been going at it hammer and tongs now for a long time, and we know how intense he is on a daily basis, match by match, how successful he has been, what he's brought to football, the adaptation that we've seen of other coaches that have tried to copy him. Far too many now, in my opinion, but they all want to be like Pep Guardiola. And I think, it's just what motivates him, what drives him. There was talk a few years back he was going to take the Brazil job because that turned him on. That motivated him. He's been in England a long time now, and he's been sitting there watching the England games, and he's been watching the whole progress and the whole, whatever goes on being a manager of England. He might have been sitting there thinking, I might have a crack at this one day, particularly as no one since Sir Alf Ramsey has won anything. That might be the challenge for Pep. That's the challenge for these super successful, not managers, but people. They need the motivation. They need the challenge. They don't need a few bob.
You've turned me back onto it again now, Terry. That's it now. I'm going to start believing that it's true again.
Wishful thinking. I was a Pep fan before when he was manager of Barcelona. Immediately, people didn't accept it. It was all, he's taken over. He's manager of Barcelona. He's got Messi. He's got this. But he built that team. And then when he come to Manchester City, everyone pretty much has now become a believer. But Roy Keane said yesterday, he didn't even get the best. He's the best option. It's worth asking the question.
It's definitely worth asking the question. They must do that, whatever happens, because there is all change at Manchester City with Chiki Beskiristan leaving the club and apparently set to retire, I think was the line, Crook. If that's the case, then he won't be going on to do much else. But what about his replacement, Hugo Viana, who was at Newcastle, has been at Sporting as the sporting director, and has been very close to Ruben Amorim. I mean, it does seem sort of set up that, well, hold on, they've changed at the top. The new sporting director is going to come in January and start paving the way for a new era. Does that era mean that Pep has already decided he's going to go and they've already lined up the replacement?
Well, I think he has already made his decision, Pep Guardiola. He's just not made it public, and obviously there is still time for him to change whatever decision that is. But I think what impresses you about this from Manchester City, and it's the complete contrast to what we've been talking about when it comes to the FA, they already had Hugo Viana ready to go. There was no real recruitment process in the aftermath of this announcement. A week or so ago that the current incumbent was leaving. They knew who they wanted. They've gone and got him. The deal's in place, and he will take over for the start of next season. So that's how, a properly run association like Manchester City have done it. And in my view, what the FA should have done when it came to replacing Gareth Southgate as well. In terms of Amorim, I don't know if it will happen immediately, but speaking to people in the know last week. They're convinced that one day he will be Manchester City manager. And if Guardiola is to depart at the end of the season, the fact his sporting director is going there, the dots all join up, don't they?
Well, I was touting him as a potential Manchester United manager and a potential Chelsea manager when the vacancies came up last time around. But he obviously was heading at one stage to talk to West Ham before turning it down. Do you know much about him, Terry? I mean, I must admit, I find him always, whenever I hear from him or speak to him, that he is incredibly impressive.
Great reputation, European football for his club as well, so he will be an option. Big step to go to Manchester City after Pep, though. I don't know if it's a well-paid job, but it's a big, massive step. I believe Pep will leave. I think the reason he came to City was because of Begiristain. They played together at Barcelona. They worked together. He was one of the main reasons that Pep got the job at Barcelona. He believed in Pep. And Pep wasn't going to Manchester City without Begiristain being there. I mean, there were, at that time, massive jobs about the Pep at his pick. But he wanted to work with Begiristain. So the fact that Begiristain is leaving wouldn't surprise me in the least that Pep goes with him. I think it's not a business relationship. It's a long-time friendship that work well together. Whether Pep will have the appetite to start again with someone else at City, I very much doubt it. I think with Begiristain going, I think that opens the door for Pep to go too.
Okay. And would he take a sabbatical this time?
I think so again, yes. I think he will.
If he doesn't take the England job.
I mean, yeah, unless England, he takes the England. Well, that's the other option, isn't it? It's not full time. It's not banging away for 10 months of the year, maybe 11 months of the year. Now, it's, as we're doing once a month for this 3-month period, and then qualification process, and then the big coming together for the European Championships and the World Cup finals. So it's a different beast being manager. I was assistant manager in Northern Ireland, and it drove you mad that you didn't see the players and weren't able to work with those players from on a daily basis. But you got used to it, and it kind of become if you were like Pep, that might be just what he needs at the moment.
But he isn't going to be able to take the job until next September. He's not going to be able to take a job as in the dugout until next September. He might agree it between now and then, but he won't be able to do it until then because he is going to see out the season with Manchester City, no doubt about that. And they play in the Club World Cup, which is going to run to the the end of July. I mean, it's such a long season for them. So he would miss the March internationals. He would miss the June internationals. By the time he took over, World Cup qualifying would be halfway through, and he'd only have 10 months, less than that, to work with a team before the World Cup. I'm not sure that he would be happy enough with that. He might think that that's not ideal. Then you go into the realms of sort of fantasy land. Could he do both jobs at the same time? Well, if you spoke to him last week, as we did when we were talking about the international break, and he was like, oh, thank God, I'm going to have a couple of weeks off, chill out. The players are going away, I'm going away, I'm tired. It shows you how much intensity he puts in on a day-to-day basis. So he's not going to be available to be able to do that in a caretaker part-time role, because he just doesn't do part-time. He only does full throttle, doesn't he? That's just the kind of guy that he is. So again, that's another reason that sort of turns me off it. I hope I'm wrong, but yeah, I think it'll probably be Tuchel, Howe, or Potter now, and I'm leaning towards those top two. If you're a betting man, Crook, where are you going?
Crikey. I think it depends. I think it depends on how Newcastle's season pans out, how secure Eddie Howe's relationship with the board there is. And we know that he's lost Amanda Staveley, which I think was massive for him in the summer. I'm not sure that he's best mates with Paul Mitchell at all. So let's see. And I think maybe the FA are waiting and seeing as well, because they know there's a possibility that there could be a parting of the ways at Newcastle, which obviously negates the compensation factor. If that happens, I think it will be Eddie.
But that's not going to happen, is it? Right? For two reasons. One, Newcastle know this because A, you've just told them. But B, we're all talking about it. It's not a secret that they're interested in him. So if you're Newcastle, you're thinking the same as the FA are thinking. Oh, hold on a second. We don't have to sack Eddie and pay him up if we fall out with him. because the FA are going to give us compensation. So either way, the only way it ends is with the FA paying the money, right, Terry?
Yeah, or a mutual agreement between everyone that suits everybody. Newcastle don't want a manager that doesn't want to be there. Eddie Howe perhaps might not want to be there, but might dig his heels in for his compensation payment. And England's are at their way. So there probably is a mutual sort of agreement.
Or maybe Eddie just wants to stay at Newcastle because he actually quite likes the job.
Exactly. That I mean, only Eddie Howe knows that. But if he's not happy with how things are being run behind, and we've heard the murmurs recently about player recruitment again, but I think there is a mutual agreement there for everybody. Nobody, as I said, Newcastle don't want a manager that wants to be manager of England, and likewise. So I think there is a deal that could be done.
What are you doing, Terry, if you're a betting man? Where are you putting your money?
Eddie Howe. I think that I'm not saying he's the best. We're not going to compare him with Pep, maybe even Tuchel, but he does tick a lot of boxes. As we were talking earlier about being an English coach that's managed as ticks all the boxes in terms of what the FA are looking for. So I think he's an obvious choice, to be honest.
My heart says Eddie Howe, and I would like him to take the job for the fact that we've known him for a long time. I think tactically he's very clever. I think he knows how to get a number on some of the bigger teams that he knows aren't as good. His team isn't as good as. I think he works out problems. I think he's good with players. He has a ruthless streak, and he doesn't mind every now and again, pissing people off. That is something that he will do. But my head says that after what's happened over the course of this last few weeks, I think that they'll end up making a move for someone who's available. So I'm going to say I think it'll be Thomas Tuchel. There you go. Let's see what happens next. Okay, Premier League All Access is back on Thursday. I think we're doing Thursday morning, where you'll be able to get hold of all the previews to the big weekend games. We've got Tottenham versus West Ham on Saturday. And at one stage was on the FA shortlist to replace Gareth Southgate. But I think the compensation for him would be even bigger than the one for Eddie at this stage. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And of course, we will look ahead to all the other weekend games and give you an update on all the team news of those players that are coming back from international duty. Crook, nice to have you back in the real world after spending your weekend in fantasy land. And Terry, lovely to see you again. We'll see you soon. Keep watching Premier League All Access and listening via the podcast.